Jacob Zuma, President of South Africa, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
I've heard you recently warning Western corporations of pursuing a colonial approach to Africa. What exactly does that mean?
Well, the colonial approach that we are talking about, as you know, Africa is the only continent in the world that was colonized by Europe, totally. We had to fight what we call the anti-colonial wars to free ourselves. And they were bitter wars. They were not just small wars, very bitter. When Africa became free, there was no arrangement how to make Africa develop. So they were left as they were. Up to this day, in some of the African countries, you still have the armies of the former colonial countries. What do they want there? You still have a mentality that they look at you as a former subject when they do business with you. And the fact that we have not shifted in terms of how the economic relations are, that's a bigger problem. The companies that dominate these countries come from the former colonial countries. In no way you have the indigenous companies growing to be in charge, so to speak. So that's a kind of relationship which is very skewed. It's not balanced. And there's been no effort to them who have the means to help balancing the relationship. That's what we are talking about. We were saying so also because at times there's a bit of an interference in what Africa is doing. You know, if since you say you have listened to some of us speaking, you must have listened to us talking about a country called Libya, which from a country operating has been put into a very serious crisis. The Africans were there with a roadmap to solve the problem. They refused. They thought that the best thing is to bomb Libya out of this world. And they bombed it continuously, knowing very well that we don't agree. That is using their colonial position against those that they had colonized. And we now have ended up with that region totally undermined. And they are no longer there to solve the problems. That's the relationship I'm talking about.
But since you were very active in trying to resolve this conflict in Libya, I know that you were trying to persuade Gaddafi to step down. How that happened? Do you think that could have spared his life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The AU had a roadmap wherein Gaddafi had agreed to bow out of power with a specific arrangement guided and monitored by the AU and perhaps by others as well, so that the change that people are talking about would have come without many people being killed, without Gaddafi having died, having to die. So the AU, with a clear roadmap, was undermined by the Western countries. Mm-hmm. That's the reality.
But we see a similar situation playing out in Syria right now. People say that intervention is not an option. Others say that situation has gotten so out of hand that peacekeeping forces can really not do anything much at this point. What do you think is the best way out? Are we seeing a total failure of diplomacy in a dead-end situation in Syria?
Well, I'm not sure there's a total failure of diplomacy. Generally, people agreed. We've all been calling for a kind of coming together of the Syrian people to solve their problems, that they should be helped to do so. But some countries have been saying no, because the matter went to the Security Council. They could not agree. That has been the problem. And that's part of what makes smaller countries or countries that are not members of the Security Council to have a problem if that institution does not change or transform. Because it means we can sit one day, as we are looking at in Syria, look at a country being destroyed before our eyes in this modern age, as if it is decades back wherein there could be wars that could finish the countries. Nobody can explain in this modern age, in democratic age, that why have we allowed Syria to be destroyed as it has been destroyed. So it's a big problem. Now I'm happy that people are beginning to say we need to find a solution. In fact, for people who are saying it's too late now, they want it that way. Because there was a time we could have come in we could have said, solve the problems, find a solution, whatever views. People didn't do so because it was not satisfying the interests.
Mr. President, if it were to help resolve the problem in Syria, would you be ready to host President Assad in South Africa and give him asylum?
Well, I'm not sure whether you want me to answer that question really, because I don't know what is it that makes people think he should leave Syria. He's a Syrian. There's been a problem that has developed in Syria. He's part of it. He must participate in resolving it. What Syrian people should do is to find a solution. And the solution I don't think is a good solution, a solution that then ejects other citizens out of their own countries. Because if it is agreed, it should be agreed how then it would be handling a man who was the head of state when the problem began. I don't think we should begin to say, can South Africa host him if he's... This business of people leaving their countries because there are political disagreements, I'm not sure whether it works. Because I can be out there and I can be unhappy, I can plan to come back and I'll come back fighting. Because they must find a solution that must be accepted by everybody, including what happens to those who have been acting on either side. That solution should include that. I think jumping into a solution whether a country could accept that man or not is going too far and even beginning to influence what kind of a solution we have about certain individuals. If they were part of the problem, they must be part of the solution.
You know, partially huge problem in the Syrian conflict is uncontrolled terrorism. And I know that South Africa's media has been carrying a lot of the story lately about Al-Qaeda terrorist training in South African camps with really no action from the government. Do you fear that maybe radical Islam can reach Africa as far as your country?
Well, I can't estimate that because I don't know how it operates. All I know right now, it has begun to be a problem in Northern Africa. And that's our concern as African countries. Because we don't want it to spread as far as it could. And of course, there has been those reports in South Africa wherein secretly people have been trying to train. I think that is the word they've been using in South Africa, that there have been some places where they've been seen or found training, not fighting, which means people training maybe to be sent to other places we don't know. That's why I'm saying you cannot answer the question how far it will spread. What is important is that the world must stop it from spreading because it is not good at all, the way it handles things in the places where it goes.
I would like to get back really shortly to what we were saying about the colonization of Africa by Europe. There is also widespread belief that Europe, because it colonized Africa completely, like you said, at some point they just left Africa with disease and ruined economies, and they're morally indebted towards Africa, not only economically. Do you believe that also? Is Europe indebted?
Of course, yes, they messed up Africa. Not just they're indebted, they actually messed up Africa. They should have corrected their mistakes if they thought they committed some mistakes. In other countries, they did nothing. They did not development. But in the majority of cases, they sucked the wealth of that continent into their countries and made their countries rich and did not develop Africa. That's a reality. If things were equal, they would have said, look, let us do something to help these free Africans now to develop. They just abandoned Africa.
But what about China? Because everyone knows that China has a large appetite for African resources at this point. How do you make sure that they don't become the new colonialists of the 21st century?
They can't be. China is not colonizing anyone. Europe held a conference to discuss how to colonize Africa, took a resolution collectively. China has not done so. They came to Africa not to do business. They came to Africa to colonize. That was their mission. China's mission is different. They're coming to do business in Africa. And I know that many people ask that question. China is doing business in Africa. I think it's going to depend on how Africa does business with China. That's the main thing. But you cannot equate the two. I think it's a wrong equation to say China is now coming to colonize Africa. Not at all. China has come to develop. It has brought better development in a short space of time than what the colonialists did. in decades, if not centuries.
But at this point, Europe still remains one of your biggest trading partners, and
Of course, yes,
their
there's no doubt about it.
crisis has hit you even more than
No
they.
doubt about it, precisely because of their influence in the continent, they remain the biggest trading partners.
So are you going to diversify?
And that's why their problems impact on us.
Are you going to try to diversify your trade?
We've been trying to do so, we're trying to do so. We're in the process of that. That's why, as you asked about BRICS, it's just one of the steps that to begin not to concentrate on the continent, that in fact looks after itself more than looking after the partners that it works with.
I know that lately there's been a will to create a BRICS development bank. There are already such institutions throughout the world, like the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank. What will be different about this particular bank? How would it operate differently from other institutions that are similar?
You know for a fact that there's a hue and cry from the developing countries that the established banks today or financial institutions are very discriminatory. They are not allowing other parts of or regions of the world to participate. There's been a lot of debate about the need to transform the financial institutions. They are resisting to transform. And the manner in which they are dealing with those that needs to be helped. They are using the rules that were established decades and decades ago. The world has changed. These institutions have not changed with the world. They still remain dealing with matters in the manner in which they do. There will be very few countries, if there will be any, that would say, as a result of them approaching these institutions, they were able to grow and get out of trouble. There will be very few that you could think of. This bank that we have agreed to establish is going to operate differently. Firstly, it's going to focus on the developing world. It's going to focus on the economic development of the third world. It's going to look, for an example, as in Africa, we are engaged in the massive infrastructure development in different countries as a collective in the continent. And these have been there for a long time, long before we thought of this bank. And there's been a problem how to fund them as quickly as possible, precisely because of the rules that I'm talking about. This bank, even before it is finally established, already the African countries have engaged BRICS leadership to say this bank must be useful. So it's going to be user-friendly to the developing countries, very deliberately, so that it is helpful to develop the economy of the developing countries. And the kind of conditions that is going to put, they are not there now, but certainly there will be the conditions that help to get those countries that are in trouble out of those troubles.
Do I understand correctly that we're talking mainly about BRICS countries themselves and the countries that are surrounding them when we talk about...
No, we're talking about the bank that is going to deal with the developing world, so to speak.
All of the world.
It's not restricted to BRICS or to few countries around. All the countries that are developing countries. This, in other words, is a new bank that reflects the changed world that's going to be dealing with people differently from the banks that are dealing with the kind of thinking of the old world. So every country will benefit. There's no country that's not going to contribute. It's not done for BRICS only. BRICS does business with the developing world, of course with others. So because this bank is BRICS Bank, it will be dealing with the countries that it deals with them.
Okay, Mr. President, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much.